Hello guys, back at it with another video. It's Will, your boy. Will Thunder Talks here with another thing to discuss. Alright, today, what does being mentally healthy look like? Certainly something I feel that comes up for people a lot when we think about some of the challenges we face, right? As people in our lives, when we're like struggling, we talk about depression, anxiety, unaliving ourselves, a lot of other conditions, and ADHD, autism, all of these things that like can contribute to mental health or be a different way of processing things, right? But like, what does being mentally healthy look like? It's a really important thing of a bunch of things. And to be more specific on those things, I think it's really critical to have balance, okay? So when I think of what being mentally healthy looks like, when I think of like humans, us as organisms, it's kind of complicated because actually when we like think about it, like I'm not a biologist, so this is like my opinion, right? This might conflict with real science, but these are my thoughts. When I think about like a biological organism, any biological organism, we are one of those. There needs to be a very specific balance, right? I think of like human bodies as like a weird domino effect of a lot of things, okay? So if you are physically really struggling in some way, if you are physically in pain, it can be really hard to feel like you have good mental health. Okay, so being mentally healthy, in my opinion, is like having the balance of a bunch of these things. I think something that our culture really kind of strives for, encourages, and pushes people to is extremes. Okay, I think a lot of us are pushed to do more, be ambitious, solve the world's problems, go to the nth degree of this thing and that thing and that thing, right? And I think a lot of us really want just balance. I think like that's what being mentally healthy is looking like, right? If you want to change the world, you have to go to extremes to do it. And guess what? Our body ain't built for extremes. Our body's like, hey, be at this exact bodily temperature forever. If you go above that, I think it's like 38 degrees Celsius, right? If you go above that, you have a fever. If you go below that, you got other problems too, right? Our body really wants to stay in a really tight range, really, right? So I think that the same is true with being mentally healthy, right? We need to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We need to do a little bit of exercise. We need to do a little bit of socializing. We need to do a little bit of eating. We need to do a significant amount of sleeping. We need a bit of all this stuff. And sometimes I feel our culture really wants us to like become obsessive. There's an obsessive nature to like, I think the way video games are made these days, I think our culture breeds addiction intentionally. Right, which is inherently like not mentally healthy when we zoom out and look at it, right? I think, when I think about kind of being a man in the modern world, right, I think that comes from like a socially enforced position of extremes, right? This might be just me, but I feel like a lot of the ideas of masculinity are you're like a provider and you push to make a ton of money for a family, and maybe you have like a business, and like I don't know if y'all have ever ran a business, but like running a business is an extreme thing to do, okay? It's like your life, it's everything you're about. You eat, sleep, and breathe this thing. Otherwise nothing happens, right? It's all on you. It all falls on you, right? So when we think about pushing ourselves to extremes, running a business is an extreme, right? Because then like you're like a local business owner. I speak to local business owners. I work with local business owners, and it's like, oh my God, when you really think about how much you're like giving of yourself to like this idea of a business, it's like a lot, okay? You can't just switch off from it or the business could slump, right? The success of it is on your shoulders. And that's kind of extreme, right? Back in the day, we were like, hey, as long as I got my grain or my berries and I eat every other day, yeah, sound great. You know, agriculture was a great boon in human history that allowed people to eat more regularly and have a better availability of calories, which was essential to doing more and not dying. But generally, our body wants us to steer away from extremes, right? When our body's not inflamed, not pushed to a certain position. And, you know, when I was super fat, and I'm working on that, I'm still a bit chunky, my body was pushed to an extreme, right? I was eating in excess of calories. And for me, I think I was doing that because I was in an environment where there was scarcity when I was a kid, right? Because I was broke, I was poor, and all we'd get were like these reduced ready meals that were like high in salt and high in fat and sugar and all that kind of stuff. And I think it kind of really wired my brain to go, hey, let's eat a bunch while there's food here, right? And also I think there was a lot of other kind of guilt challenges that come in with it. It's like really complicated to talk about, that had a knock-on effect to my kind of mental health, right? And when you have these like negative emotions, that tips you off balance, that creates another weight in you, right? If you think of your mind and your body as like a bunch of kind of scales all lined up together, when one's tipping one way, all the other ones are kind of tipping around too, right? And then there needs to be like, maybe we like to think a corrective extreme to correct, like, say, that my intense feelings of guilt, for example. And that corrective extreme, I think, for me, was to eat, avoid, get into video games, be a video game addict. I've already talked about this on the channel, but I was historically a video game addict. Be a pueris aeternus, be in this fantasy land away from all the pain of the world, right? Because it was too much for me to bear, right? So you can see, just hearing that little snippet, and you maybe relate to that, and I'm curious if you do, throw some of your stuff in the comments, that all of this stuff can snowball really quickly into like making a lot of other stuff really hard, right? To have a balance that works for you, where you feel like you have choices and agency in life, right? Because that's what we all really want. We want like options. We want to feel like we can go here and do that, go over there and do this. Like, that's normal and healthy, but a lot of us don't feel that because we're told we can't, or we don't feel we have agency over our decisions. And having those emotionally challenging situations boosts cortisol in the system. Cortisol can like contribute to inflammation. Inflammation can contribute to the development of certain health conditions and problems. I don't know if you've all ever seen this, but like some people that have pretty serious long-term health conditions are also kind of people that have been hit with really traumatic environments, episodes, experiences. Certainly my experience has a really strong correlation with that, and all of that knocks things off balance. So like how it's like a lot harder to be mentally healthy. You can, but it's a lot harder when you're in an environment where the scales are constantly being tipped one way to another extreme. So how do you manage the deficit, right? You cope. We all cope, right? For me, coping was video games and food. Now it's running around like a silly person, and journaling and probably sleeping. So, you know, to be mentally healthy, I think, in my opinion, is to also be content. And I think our cultures, certainly in the UK and in the US, really don't like contentment, right? Because we want to buy more, we want to be more, we want to be somebody, right? I've heard that so much. Like, what does that mean, right? What does being somebody mean? How do we expect being somebody to feel? And my headcanon, you might call it, is like, especially in the US anyway, I find that there's this idea of being somebody, and that's like an extreme, like a blissful experience that you will embrace and experience for over a long period of time, right? That's not how our brains work. Really not in my experience. Like, we don't live in like a blissful, like, when we have very positive experiences, okay, for them to feel impactful, they have to be high relative to a baseline, okay? So the most fun thing you've ever experienced, right, is only fun and amazing and really fun. You know, I'm thinking of when I went to Prague. That was a really great experience because it was different from my baseline, okay? So like what our body feels, what our mind connects with is contrast, right? Which again, kind of that's the direction of the balance idea. But when you don't have enough boring, for instance, you just have a ton of fun, you're like not going to enjoy the fun that much anymore. You're going to be all tapped out of fun. And then nothing feels enjoyable anymore. So, but you know, for a lot of people, again, I empathize. If hard things have happened to you, being in the silence is deafening, right? Even if there's like unresolved things, or there's a discomfort in just being still, this can all result in making it hard to create a baseline that can allow for a lot of like positive feeling relative to it. So, yeah. I would say, to really shoot the question a bit more, what does being mentally healthy look like? It looks like having some healthy, positive relationships, being a role model in your community if you can, helping people you care about, eating enough, drinking enough water, addressing your own challenges in your relationships, accepting you will make mistakes. Self-compassion's huge, and you might really struggle with that. It's not uncommon to. I feel that too sometimes. But the physical and the mental and the emotional, the trifecta, all play into each other. You know, if you don't have these emotions aren't processed, then they're going to materialize physically. A lot of studies back this up. Same thing with if you've got some ideas you can't let go of that generate like emotions, that's going to also have physical knock-on effects to your body. So it's going to trigger cortisol, it's going to trigger inflammation. So like, you know, a lot of scientists say, just be chill, man. You'll be fine if you're just chill and you live longer because you're chill. That works because you have less cortisol in your body and you have less inflammation. But there are also very real environmental things that we can't control that makes us pissed off and stressed, right? So like, how the hell can you do that? It's a hard question to answer. I have a lot of other ideas, but we are running up on time, people. If you want to discover a bit more about this topic, I'm going to elaborate a little more on my other channel, Thunderhawk Coaching, which I will link in the description. But I'm going to leave it there for today. You've been wonderful. I've been Will. Take care of yourself. Do your best. Sometimes it might not feel like enough, but it is. I love you. I appreciate you. I hope the love's coming through the screen. That's some love for you. However you are, whatever you believe in, you get some love from me. So you take care of yourself, and I'm going to shoot. But good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.